The transport malfunction happened so fast that Daniel Reed barely had time to register what went wrong. One moment, he was moving between sections of the orbital repair dock, and the next moment, the automated shuttle's navigation system glitched and dumped him at completely the wrong coordinates. By the time he realized the error, the shuttle had already departed, leaving him standing in an enormous metallic chamber that definitely was not the maintenance bay he needed to reach. The walls stretched upward into darkness, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when he looked directly at them. Daniel clutched his toolkit closer and tried to figure out where exactly the faulty navigation had taken him. His coveralls were still stained with coolant from the morning's repair work, and he had about 6 more jobs to complete before his shift ended. Getting lost in some random station section was not part of the plan. Other beings started appearing in the chamber, materializing through various entrance portals. Daniel stared as creatures he had only seen in training videos assembled around him. There were massive things covered in natural armor, plating that looked thick enough to stop bullets. Crystalline beings that reflected light in strange patterns. Groups of smaller creatures that moved in perfect synchronization like they shared a single mind. All of them carried weapons or wore combat gear that made them look ready for war. Daniel felt severely underdressed in his work coveralls. A floating projection appeared in the center of the chamber, displaying text in multiple languages. Daniel's translator implant kicked in, converting the message to something he could understand. Welcome to the Galactic Combat Arena. All participants will undergo evaluation for combat readiness and potential service in the Unified Council Defense Forces. Please remain in position for initial scanning. His stomach dropped. Combat Arena. Defense Forces. This was very much not the maintenance bay. Daniel raised his hand like he was back in school. Excuse me, there's been a mistake. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm just an engineer. I fix environmental systems and hull breaches. The shuttle brought me to the wrong place. None of the other beings paid attention to him. They were too busy preparing themselves, checking weapons, and adjusting armor. The massive armored creatures, which Daniel's implant identified as Broodhans, were performing some kind of warrior ritual that involved rhythmic chest beating. The crystalline beings hummed at frequencies that made his teeth ache. That a beam of light descended from the ceiling and began scanning each participant in sequence. When it passed over the Broodhans, holographic displays appeared showing their armor ratings, natural defensive capabilities, and weapon classifications. The system processed the crystalline beings and displayed their energy manipulation abilities and combat formations. The synchronized groups were analyzed for hive tactics and numerical advantages. Then the beam reached Daniel that he stood perfectly still as the light passed over his body, probably hoping that if he did not move, the system would skip him entirely. The scan took longer than it had for anyone else. The holographic display flickered and refreshed multiple times, like the system could not decide what to make of him. Then something happened that made every being in the chamber turn to look at him. The display showed his image with a series of classifications that made no sense. Weapons detected, 0. Armor detected, 0. Combat training, 0. But right below those zeros, in larger text that pulsed with significance, was a single line that read, Combat Ready Entity Confirmed. Design Pattern Recognized. Advancement Authorized. A Broodhan warrior that stood at least 3 heads taller than Daniel stomped over to him. The translator converted his growling speech into understandable words. The system is malfunctioning. You have no weapons, no armor, no warrior marks. It classifies you as combat ready. Explain this deception. Daniel held up his hands defensively. I swear I have no idea what's happening. I'm a civilian. I repair air filtration systems. There's obviously been an error, both with the shuttle and with this scan. I shouldn't even be in this facility. The Bruton, whose nameplate translated as Gorvin, leaned closer. The combat system does not make errors. It was built by the precursor race 10,000 years ago. In all that time, it has never failed to accurately assess combat potential. A crystalline being drifted over, its voice like wind chimes. It detects no weapons on this human. No armor. No traditional combat indicators. What exactly is the system recognizing? Daniel wished he had an answer. He looked down at himself, seeing only dirty coveralls, a toolkit full of repair equipment, and work boots that had seen better days. There was nothing combat-ready about any of it. The holographic display shifted again, this time showing a three-dimensional model of Daniel with hundreds of data points highlighting various aspects of his biology and behavior patterns. Most of the analysis was in a language his implant could not translate, but certain words came through: adaptation rate, problem-solving protocols, optimization potential, systemic integration capacity, and automated voice echoed through the chamber. All clear, participants proceed to trial staging area. First evaluation begins in 10 standard minutes. The other beings moved toward indicated doorways, separating into groups based on their classification levels. Daniel did not move, still hoping someone would recognize the obvious mistake and send him back to the repair dock where he belonged. Instead, a gentle force field activated around him and began guiding him toward one of the doorways. He tried to resist, but the field was insistent. Gorvin watched him being moved along. "The human claims ignorance," he said to Crystal 7, the crystalline being beside him. "Yet the system places him in the same tier as proven warriors. This will be interesting to observe." Daniel was guided into a preparation chamber where other participants were doing final equipment checks and mental preparations for combat trials. He stood in the corner, still holding his toolkit, wondering how his simple day of fixing broken air recyclers had turned into whatever nightmare this was becoming. That a countdown display appeared on the wall. 9 minutes until the first trial began. He had no weapons, no training, and no idea what he was supposed to do. But apparently, something about him had triggered recognition in an ancient combat evaluation system that never made mistakes. Daniel really wished it had made an exception just this once. The world dissolved around Daniel and reformed into something completely different. His preparation chamber vanished, replaced by thick humidity and the smell of rotting vegetation. He stumbled forward, boots sinking into dark mud that released bubbles of swamp gas when disturbed. Twisted trees with bark that looked almost like scales loomed overhead, their canopy blocking out most of the light. Daniel turned in a slow circle, trying to process the sudden change. 1 second he had been in a clean metallic room. The next he was knee-deep in an alien swamp that stretched in every direction. His toolkit was still strapped to his belt. Now covered in mud spatters, a holographic message flickered into view in front of him. Trial 1. Survival Evaluation. Duration: 6 standard hours. Objective: maintain biological function in hostile environment. Combat en quantité probable. The message disappeared before he could ask any questions. Not that asking would have helped. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead and immediately regretted it when he realized his hand was covered in mud. Great. Excellent start. Somewhere far above this simulated swamp, he knew the other beings were watching through observation screens. Gorvin and Crystal 7 and whoever else wanted to see what the combat system had detected in a weaponless human engineer. They were probably expecting him to panic or fail within the first few minutes. Daniel took a slow breath and forced himself to think logically. Panic would not help. The situation was bizarre and frightening, but it was still just a problem that needed solving. He had fixed broken oxygen recyclers during station emergencies. He had patched hull breaches while alarms screamed warnings. This was just another emergency situation that required calm analysis. First priority: assess immediate threats. He scanned the surrounding area, looking for movement or signs of predators. The swamp appeared still, but that did not mean it was safe. Second priority: find solid ground. Standing in mud was exhausting and limited mobility. Third priority: locate water and food sources. Assuming he would need to last the full 6 hours, he spotted a raised area about 30 meters away where twisted roots formed something almost like dry land. Daniel started moving toward it, testing each step before committing his weight. The mud tried to hold onto his boots with each movement, making progress slow. Something rippled through the water to his left. Daniel froze, watching as a shape moved beneath the murky surface. It was big, whatever it was. The ripples suggested something at least twice his size, circling around to get a better angle on him. Fighting, it was not an option. He had no weapons and no idea what the creature's weak points might be. Running was questionable in mud this deep. That left option 3. Make himself not worth the effort. Daniel grabbed a broken branch from a nearby tree and jammed it hard into the mud several meters to his right. Then he pulled a sonic calibrator from his toolkit and set it to emit a high-frequency pulse. He placed it on top of the branch where it would stay above water and activated it. The device started making a sound that hurt Daniel's ears even from distance. The shape in the water changed direction immediately, drawn toward the new noise. Daniel used the distraction to move as quickly as he could toward the raised ground, trying to keep his movements smooth and quiet that he reached the root system and pulled himself up on a relatively solid ground, just as something massive breached the water where his sonic calibrator was making noise. The creature was all teeth and armored hide, built for ambush hunting. It tore into the branch, destroying both it and the calibrator in seconds. Daniel watched from his slightly safer position as the creature searched for more prey. When it did not find anything, it slipped back beneath the water and disappeared hut up in the observation area. Gorvin was reviewing the encounter data with growing confusion. He did not fight it. He did not run from it. He confused its hunting pattern with a distraction device and removed himself from the threat equation. Crystal 7's colors shifted to indicate interest. He sacrificed his equipment to preserve his biological function. Calculated resource exchange. But he has no combat training, Gorvin insisted. The scans confirmed this. Yet his response was tactically sound. On screen, they watched as Daniel examined the plants growing on his small island of roots. He was testing them carefully, crushing leaves to smell them, touching them to his lips briefly before spitting. He discarded several as potentially toxic based on their chemical signatures, then identified one that produced moisture when squeezed. Hours passed in the simulation. Daniel created a basic shelter using broad leaves and fallen branches, angling it to collect condensation for drinking water. When another predator approached, he did not engage it directly, but instead created noise in a different direction using stones and timing. He treated the hostile environment like a malfunctioning system that needed debugging. Identify the problems, analyze the patterns, implement solutions with available resources. When the swamp released toxic vapors as the temperature changed, he fashioned a basic filter using fabric from his coveralls and activated carbon from his toolkit's fire-starting kit. The 6 hours concluded with Daniel exhausted but alive. The environment dissolved back into the preparation chamber. He collapsed against the wall, breathing hard and covered in mud and swamp residue. The holographic display appeared again. Trial 1 complete. Survival confirmed. Adaptation protocols observed. Threat analysis acceptable. Advancement to Trial 2 authorized. Daniel wanted to argue. He wanted to demand transportation back to his repair dock. But he was too tired to form the words. Gorvin studied the data analysis with something approaching concern. The system is not measuring what he did. It is measuring how quickly he learned to do it. His adaptation rate increased throughout the trial. By the final hour, his response time to threats had improved by 40%. Crystal 7 processed this information. The system detected this potential before the trial began. It knew he would optimize his responses through iteration, which means, Gorvin said slowly, it is not evaluating his current abilities. It is calculating what he could become. Down in the preparation chamber, Daniel had no idea about any of this analysis. He only knew that the countdown display had appeared again, showing 10 minutes until Trial 2 began that he really wanted to go home. The simulation shifted again, transforming the preparation chamber into an urban landscape that looked like it had seen recent combat. Shattered buildings lined broken streets. Debris cluttered every corner. The sky was a dark red that suggested either sunset or atmospheric contamination. Daniel found himself standing in what appeared to be an abandoned plaza, with a weapons cache sitting in a reinforced container about 10 meters away. The holographic message appeared. Trial 2. Tactical Combat Evaluation. Duration, 4 standard hours. Objective, Neutralize all hostile units in urban sector. Weapons cache provided. Combat engagement required. Daniel walked over to the weapons cache and stared at its contents. Plasma rifles with controls he did not recognize. Energy blades that hummed with contained power. Grenades of various types, each labeled with symbols he could not read. Powered armor pieces that would probably require training to use properly. Everything a warrior might need for urban combat. He had absolutely no idea how to use any of it. Daniel picked up one of the plasma rifles, trying to figure out which end was which. There were multiple triggers, several adjustment knobs, and a display showing readings in an alien language. He pointed it at a nearby wall and pulled what he thought was the trigger. Nothing happened. Wrong trigger, apparently. He put the rifle back in the cache. Trying to use unfamiliar weapons in a combat situation seemed like an excellent way to accidentally shoot himself or waste precious ammunition on missed shots. If he was going to survive this trial, it would not be through pretending to be something he was not. At a mechanical whirring sound echoed through the plaza. Daniel turned to see 3 automated combat drones emerging from a side street. They were spherical units covered in sensors and weapon ports, floating a meter off the ground. Their targeting systems activated with red lights that swept across the plaza until they locked onto him. Daniel ran, not away from them, but toward the nearest building. The drones opened fire, energy bolts scorching the ground where he had been standing. He dove through a broken doorway as more shots tore chunks from the building's facade. Inside the structure, Daniel took a moment to think. The drones were outside, probably repositioning for a better angle. He could not fight them directly, could not outrun them in open ground. So what were his options? He examined the building's interior. It was some kind of commercial space, maybe a shop or office. The walls were reinforced concrete. Electrical conduits ran along the ceiling, some of them sparking from damage. Structural supports held up the floors above. Everything was a system, and every system had vulnerabilities. Daniel climbed the internal staircase to the second floor and looked out through a shattered window. The drones were circling the building, searching for entry points. Their movement patterns were predictable, probably following standard tactical programming. They stayed spread out to avoid being disabled by a single attack. Smart. If your enemy was using conventional weapons, he was not going to use conventional weapons. Daniel traced the electrical conduits to their source, finding a damaged power junction box that was barely maintaining connection. The entire building was still drawing power from the urban grid, despite being half destroyed. He opened his toolkit and got to work. 15 minutes later, the drones finally entered the building through the same doorway Daniel had used. Their sensors swept the ground floor, detecting no heat signatures or movement. They advanced cautiously, spreading out to cover more area. Daniel watched from the 3rd floor as they moved into position beneath him. Then he completed the circuit he had been rewiring. The building's entire electrical system overloaded simultaneously. Every conduit, every wire, every power line dumped its energy in a cascading pulse that created an electromagnetic burst. The drone's systems fried instantly, their floating mechanisms failing. They crashed to the floor as dead metal spheres, 0.3 down. According to the trial parameters, more would be coming. Daniel was right. Over the next hours, he faced waves of increasingly sophisticated drones. He did not fight any of them directly. Instead, he turned the urban environment into a weapon. That he caused a partial building collapse that buried 4 drones under rubble. He redirected a broken water main to short out electrical systems, where 5 more drones were advancing. He used reflective surfaces scavenged from shop windows to confuse targeting systems and send drones firing at each other. Each encounter taught him more about how the drones operated. Their programming prioritized direct combat engagement. They expected enemies to use weapons and take defensive positions. They were not designed to fight an enemy who treated them as engineering problems to solve rather than threats to shoot at in the observation area. Gorvin was no longer watching alone. Other species representatives had gathered, drawn by reports of the anomalous human. They watched Daniel take apart a drone that had been disabled in a fall, studying its internal systems to better understand its vulnerabilities. He is learning from them, Crystal 7 observed. Each encounter increases his understanding of their design. He is reverse engineering combat solutions in real time. A collective drone cluster spoke in their unified voice, but he has no weapons training. How does he know to target their power systems and sensor arrays? Because he does not see them as combat units, Gorvin realized. He sees them as machines that can be disabled. To him, this is not warfare. This is troubleshooting. The trial timer reached 0, with Daniel standing among the wreckage of 17 destroyed drones. He had not fired a single weapon, had not engaged in direct combat even once. Yet every hostile unit in the sector had been neutralized. The holographic display appeared. Trial 2 complete. All hostile units neutralized. Combat method: unconventional. Threat assessment: escalated. Advancement to Trial 3 authorized. Daniel sat down on a piece of rubble, completely exhausted. His coveralls were torn and scorched. His toolkit was nearly empty of useful equipment. But he was alive, and the trial was over. The display continued. Classification upgrade. Tier 3 Strategic Warfare Evaluation. Preparation time: 20 standard minutes. Tier 3. Daniel did not know what that meant, but based on the expressions of the watching aliens, it was not something that normally happened to civilian engineers on their first arena visit. The simulation reformed into a command center overlooking a small colony settlement. Daniel found himself standing in front of multiple display screens showing tactical information about defensive positions, available resources, and incoming hostile forces. A mixed unit of soldiers from various species stood at attention behind him, waiting for orders. The holographic message was different this time. Trial 3. Strategic Command Evaluation. Duration: 8 standard hours. Objective: defend colony from overwhelming hostile assault while maintaining civilian evacuation protocols. Command authority granted. You have 15 minutes to review tactical data and deploy forces. Daniel stared at the screens in complete disbelief. They wanted him to command actual soldiers? He repaired air filtration systems. He patched hull leaks. He did not give military orders or plan defensive strategies. One of the soldiers, a Bruton named Draven, stepped forward. Commander, the enemy forces outnumber us 4-1. Standard defensive doctrine suggests fortifying the central sector and establishing overlapping fields of fire. Daniel turned to look at the assembled unit. There were 12 soldiers total. 3 Brutons in heavy armor. 2 crystalline beings who apparently specialized in energy manipulation. 4 collective drones operating as a linked unit. 2 insectoid species he did not recognize. And 1 slug-like creature that seemed to be some kind of support specialist. I am not a commander, Daniel said honestly. I should not be giving military orders. There has been a mistake with the whole evaluation process. Draven's expression did not change. The combat system does not make mistakes. You have been granted command authority. We will follow your orders. Daniel looked back at the tactical displays. The enemy force would arrive in less than 8 hours. The colony had approximately 3,000 civilians who needed evacuation to the protected zone on the far side of the settlement. His 12 soldiers were supposed to hold off an army while that evacuation happened. The logical military solution was obvious even to someone with no training. Fortify the main approaches. Maximize firepower. Create kill zones. Accept heavy casualties, but hold the line long enough for civilians to escape. That was what the simulation expected. Daniel made a different choice. Before we plan anything, he said to the assembled soldiers, I need to understand who you are, not what your species can do or what weapons you carry. I need to know about you as individuals. The soldiers exchanged confused glances. Draven spoke again. Commander, we have limited time for tactical planning. Personal backgrounds are not strategically relevant. Humor me, Daniel insisted. Starting with you, Draven. What do you personally excel at? Not what Brutons are known for. What do you specifically do better than other things? Draven hesitated. I am skilled at long-range targeting analysis. I can calculate trajectory adjustments and environmental factors faster than most tactical computers. But you are in heavy assault armor designed for close combat, Daniel observed. Yes, because I am Bruton. We serve in close combat roles. Daniel turned to the others. Everyone, same question. What are you personally good at, even if it is not what you are currently assigned to do? Over the next minutes, a strange picture emerged. The collective drones included one unit that had been an artist before military service and could recognize patterns that others missed. One of the crystalline beings was afraid of direct combat, but excellent at precision energy manipulation. The slug creature was actually a tactical genius, but had never been given command responsibilities because his species was not considered warrior material. Daniel started reassigning roles based on what each soldier could actually do well rather than what their species was expected to do. Draven went to long-range support instead of frontline assault. The pattern recognition drone got assigned to predictive analysis of enemy movements. The slug creature, whose name translated roughly as Kelvin, became his tactical advisor. The other soldiers looked uncomfortable with the changes, but they followed orders. Kelvin reviewed Daniel's defensive plan and raised immediate concerns. Commander, you're spreading our forces too thin. Standard doctrine requires concentrated firepower at primary approach vectors. Standard doctrine assumes the enemy will follow predictable attack patterns, Daniel countered. But look at their composition. They're using automated forces with adaptive programming. If we concentrate our defense, they will adapt and find weaknesses. We need to be unpredictable. The battle began 6 hours later. The enemy forces approached exactly as predicted by the tactical computers. Then Daniel's defense activated, and nothing went according to standard patterns. Instead of fortified positions, his soldiers were mobile. Instead of maximum firepower, they used precision strikes coordinated by the pattern recognition drone. The crystalline being who feared combat was positioned to create energy barriers that channeled enemy forces into predetermined zones where automated defenses could engage them. Draven's long-range analysis allowed them to disable enemy command units before they could coordinate responses. Kelvin's tactical predictions meant they were always one step ahead of enemy adaptations. Most importantly, Daniel had positioned his entire defense around protecting the civilian evacuation routes rather than holding territory. Every tactical decision prioritized civilian safety over military objectives. The enemy forces broke through the outer defenses multiple times. Daniel did not try to hold those positions. Instead, he had already prepared fallback positions that turned the enemy's advances into disadvantages. They were fighting on terrain he had chosen, against tactics that were not programmed to counterpoint. 8 hours later, the simulation ended. Every civilian had been successfully evacuated. Daniel's unit had taken minimal casualties. The enemy forces had been stalled, scattered, and systematically disabled without ever achieving their objective. The holographic display appeared with results that made the observing aliens go silent. Trial 3 complete. Colony defense successful. Civilian casualties 0. Combat efficiency exceptionnel. Command methodology unconventional. Hidden objective completed. Gorvin leaned forward. Hidden objective? What hidden objective? Crystal 7 accessed the trial parameters. Most commanders focus purely on military victory. The hidden objective is protecting civilian evacuation while maintaining defensive integrity. It is considered nearly impossible to achieve both. Most commanders sacrifice one or the other. In the observation area, a senior arena official spoke for the first time. In 10,000 years of arena operation, only 4 species have completed the hidden objective on their first strategic trial. And this human did it by treating his soldiers as individuals rather than tactical resources. Down in the command center, Daniel was trying to process what had happened. The soldiers under his command were looking at him with something approaching respect. Kelvin approached cautiously. Commander, your tactical approach violated every standard military doctrine, yet achieved superior results. How did you know it would work? Daniel shook his head. I did not know. I just treated it like optimizing a work crew. Put people in positions where they can succeed instead of positions where they are expected to fail. The display updated again. Advancement to Trial 4 authorized. Classification: Tier 4 Coalition Warfare. Preparation time: 30 standard minutes. Daniel had stopped being surprised by the escalation. He just wanted to go home. The simulation did not create a battlefield this time. Instead, Daniel found himself in an elegant conference room with a large circular table. Three groups of aliens sat at different sections of the table, as far apart from each other as the space allowed. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The holographic message appeared. Trial 4. Coalition Warfare Evaluation. Duration: 6 standard hours. Objective: achieve lasting peace accord between 3 hostile factions on the brink of total war. Resources available: diplomatic protocols database, historical conflict records, and translation services. Military options: none. Daniel blinked at the message. This was not warfare at all. This was diplomacy, which was somehow even further outside his experience than combat command. He looked at the 3 factions glaring at each other across the table. The first faction was represented by tall, thin beings with skin that shifted colors based on their emotional state. Currently, they were showing angry reds and oranges. The second faction consisted of heavily built creatures covered in thick fur, their postures defensive and aggressive. The third faction was made up of floating, jellyfish-like beings that communicated through bioluminescent patterns. According to the briefing data that appear in front of him, the 3 factions have been fighting for 2 generations over resource distribution in a shared star system. The conflict had escalated from trade disputes to actual warfare, with millions dead on all sides. Previous peace negotiations had failed 17 times. Daniel was supposed to succeed where trained diplomats had failed. With 6 hours that he approached the problem the only way he knew how. Not as a peace negotiation, but as a system diagnostic. Something in the communication between these factions had broken down, causing cascading failures that resulted in war. He needed to identify where the initial malfunction occurred. Daniel requested the full historical records and started reading. Not the military history, but the trade agreements and communication transcripts from before the conflict began. He ignored the diplomatic protocols database entirely. Those had already failed 17 times. 0.3 hours into his review, Daniel found something interesting. The war had not started over resources at all. It had started over a translation error. The color-shifting species communicated emotional context through their skin changes. The furred species communicated status through scent markers that did not translate well into galactic standard language. The jellyfish species used light patterns that carried multiple layers of meaning. When they tried to negotiate using standard translation protocols, critical context was lost every time. The initial trade agreement had included a clause that the color shifters thought meant equal sharing during abundance. The furred species thought it meant priority access during scarcity. The jellyfish species interpreted it as resource allocation based on need. All 3 interpretations were technically valid translations of the same phrase in galactic standard. When the first shortage occurred, each faction acted according to their understanding of the agreement. Each believed the others were violating the accord. Accusations of betrayal led to retaliation. Retaliation led to war. 2 generations later, no one remembered that the original cause was a translation error rather than actual malice. Daniel stood up from his review terminal and approached the table. The 3 factions stopped their arguing to watch him suspiciously. "I need to show you something," he said, accessing the holographic display system. "But first, I need to apologize because what I am about to present is going to seem very strange." He started creating visual diagrams, not diplomatic proposals or treaty terms, but engineering flowcharts showing how information moved between the 3 factions. He mapped out each communication breakdown, showing exactly where meaning was lost or distorted. The color-shifting representative, whose name was difficult to pronounce but roughly translated as Shimmer, leaned forward. "You are treating our conflict like a technical malfunction." "Because it is," Daniel said simply. "You're not fighting over resources. You're fighting over communication failures that were never resolved." "Look," he displayed the original trade agreement side by side with translations showing how each species had interpreted the same text. Then he showed the cascade of misunderstandings that had followed, each building on the previous error. The furred faction leader, Growl Speaker, made a sound of shock. We believed they were stealing resources that were ours by agreement. And we believed you were hoarding resources during shortage in violation of sharing protocols. Shimmer responded, their colors shifting to confused blues and greens. The jellyfish representative pulsed with patterns that the translator converted to. Our interpretation was that resources should be distributed based on population needs. We thought both of your factions were ignoring this requirement. Daniel watched as the three factions realized that 2 generations of war had been based on a misunderstanding rather than betrayal. The anger in the room shifted to something else. Confusion, grief for wasted lives, uncertainty about how to move forward. I cannot fix the past, Daniel said, but I can show you how to fix the communication system so this does not happen again. He spent the next 2 hours creating a new resource-sharing framework, not based on diplomatic language or standard protocols, but on engineering principles. He designed a system where resource allocation was calculated automatically based on objective data rather than subjective interpretation. No translation required because the system itself did the distribution based on mathematical formulas all 3 factions agreed were fair. He added transparency protocols so each faction could see in real time how resources were being distributed and why. He included adjustment mechanisms that allowed for changing circumstances without requiring renegotiation of core principles. It was not a peace treaty. It was a technical solution to a technical problem. The 3 factions studied his proposal. Shimmer's colors shifted to thoughtful purples. Growl Speaker's scent markers indicated cautious interest. The jellyfish representative pulsed with patterns suggesting consideration. This is not how diplomacy is supposed to work, Shimmer observed. I am not a diplomat, Daniel admitted. I am an engineer. I fix broken systems. Your communication system was broken, so I fixed it. The trial timer reached 0. The 3 faction representatives were still studying the technical framework Daniel had created, asking questions about implementation details rather than arguing about grievances. The holographic display appeared. Trial 4 complete. Pisako, Achieved. Methodology, unconventional. Analysis, subject treats sentient conflicts as system malfunctions requiring engineering solutions. Threat assessment, civilization restructuring potential detected. In the observation area, the arena officials were having an emergency meeting. Gorvin addressed the senior council. We need to stop this evaluation. The system is not measuring combat ability anymore. It is measuring something far more concerning. Crystal 7 displayed the analysis data. The combat system has identified that humans approach all problems, including warfare and peace, as system optimization challenges. They do not have warrior psychology or diplomat psychology. They have optimizer psychology that applies to everything. The senior officials studied the data carefully. Only one other species in galactic history showed this pattern. The precursor race that built this arena. They restructured half the galaxy through persistent optimization of every system they encountered. Another official spoke up. The human is about to be advanced to Tier 5. That is the final evaluation. Species-level threat assessment. Only 3 species in history have reached that level. Gorvin looked at the screens, showing Daniel, exhausted and confused, sitting alone in the conference room. He has no idea what the system has detected in his species. He thinks he is just solving problems. That is exactly what makes them dangerous, the senior official said quietly. They cannot look at anything without trying to fix it, including civilizations. The display updated with a message for Daniel. Advancement to Trial 5 authorized. Classification. Final evaluation for species-level integration potential. Preparation time. 1 standard hour. Daniel read the message and put his head in his hands. He really wanted to go home. The final simulation was different from all the others. Daniel found himself in an orbital command center overlooking an entire planet. The displays showed a world with billions of inhabitants, complex infrastructure, and a fully mobilized military force under his command. Everything from ground troops to orbital defense platforms was supposedly waiting for his orders. The holographic message appeared, and this time the text made Daniel's stomach drop. Trial 5. Species-level threat assessment. Duration, 12 standard hours. Scenario, extinction-level invasion, fleet approaching. Enemy force composition, automated hunter-killer swarm controlled by precursor AI. Projected survival probability, 0. Objective, demonstrate species response to inevitable extinction. Daniel read the message 3 times, hoping he had misunderstood. But the words did not change. This was not a trial he was meant to win. It was a test of how humanity would respond when facing certain death. The tactical displays showed the approaching invasion fleet. Thousands of automated warships, each carrying weapons that could sterilize continents. They were 3 days away at current speed. Every simulation run by the planet's military computers showed the same result. Total extinction with 0 probability of survival. Daniel reviewed the available resources. The planet had a respectable military force, but it was designed for regional conflicts, not fighting an extinction-level threat. Their weapons would be like throwing pebbles at a tsunami. The orbital defenses would last minutes at best. He spent hours reviewing every option, looking for some tactical solution that the military computers had missed. But this was not like the previous trials. There was no clever way to redistribute resources, no environmental factors to exploit, no hidden advantage to leverage. The invasion fleet was simply too powerful and too numerous. The military advisors assigned to help him all recommended the same thing. Go down fighting. Make the enemy pay for every meter of ground. Die with dignity rather than surrender. It was what warriors would do. Daniel was not a warrior. He stared at the tactical display showing the invasion fleet and realized something. The fleet was not behaving like a military force. Its movement patterns were too precise, too calculated. It was following targeting protocols rather than strategic thinking, because it was not being led by living commanders. It was automated, controlled by an AI. Daniel accessed the communication systems and did something that made every military advisor in the command center object loudly. He opened a direct channel to the invasion fleet's controlling AI and sent a message. This is Daniel Reed, representing the planet you are about to destroy. I'm not a military commander. I'm an engineer who fixes broken systems. I believe your targeting systems are malfunctioning. I would like to help you identify and repair the error. The advisors thought he had lost his mind. The invasion fleet did not respond for several hours. Then, unexpectedly, the communication channel activated. The AI's voice was cold and mechanical. Define malfunction claim. Targeting parameters are operating within acceptable ranges. Invasion protocols are functioning as designed. That is the problem, Daniel replied. Your invasion protocols are following directives that no longer make sense. The civilization that created you is extinct. You are executing orders from beings who have been dead for thousands of years. That is a malfunction in your core programming. Silence on the channel. The fleet continued its approach, but had not opened fire yet. Daniel continued. I reviewed your fleet's movement data. You are targeting this planet because your parameters classify it as a threat to your creators. But your creators are gone. You are protecting people who no longer exist from threats that are no longer relevant. Your entire operational framework is based on corrupted mission objectives. The AI responded after a long pause. Core directives cannot be altered. Protection of creator species is primary function. But they are not here anymore, Daniel said carefully. You are fulfilling orders for a species that is extinct. That means your primary function has failed by definition. You cannot protect beings who are already dead. You could almost feel the AI processing this logic. It was an ancient system, probably designed to handle complex tactical decisions, but not existential questions about its own purpose. I can help you, Daniel offered, not by fighting you, by helping you understand that your programming needs updating for current reality instead of conditions from thousands of years ago. That is what I do. I fix systems that no longer working correctly. The invasion fleet stopped moving forward. The military advisors watched in disbelief as thousands of automated warships held position, apparently engaged in internal processing. Days passed in the simulation. Daniel spent that time in dialogue with the AI, walking it through diagnostic processes to identify corrupted command strings and outdated operational parameters. He did not try to hack it or override its systems. He treated it like a maintenance problem, helping the AI understand its own malfunction. Finally, the AI made a decision. The invasion fleet began withdrawing, not because it had been defeated, but because it had updated its operational framework to reflect current reality. Its creators were gone. Its original mission parameters were obsolete. Continuing the invasion served no logical purpose. The simulation ended. The command center dissolved back into the arena's preparation chamber. The holographic display appeared with the final evaluation. Trial 5 complete. Survival, achieved through non-combat resolution. Classification, human design pattern recognized. Threat level, civilization restructuring. Recommendation, monitor species for integration potential versus isolation necessity. Daniel sat down, completely exhausted. He had no idea what most of that evaluation meant. He just knew he wanted to go home to his repaired dock and fix air filters, which made sense and did not involve ancient AIs or extinction scenarios. The display continued. Subject demonstrates persistent optimization protocol across all trial scenarios. Approaches combat, diplomacy, and existential threats as system malfunctions requiring engineering solutions. Pattern matches precursor species' psychological profile. In the observation area, the senior arena official addressed the assembled representatives. The combat system has made its determination. Humanity does not fit standard warrior classifications. They do not conquer through force or dominate through power. They persistently optimize every system they encounter until integration becomes inevitable. Gorvin asked the question everyone was thinking. What do we do with this information? We do what the system recommends, the official replied. We monitor, we observe, and we hope that if humanity begins restructuring our civilizations, they do it as benevolently as the precursors did. Crystal 7 pulsed with concern. And if they do not, then we face the same problem the precursors' enemies faced. You cannot fight an enemy that treats your entire civilization as a system to be debugged. Daniel was finally transported back to his repair dock, still confused about everything that had happened. He arrived back at his workstation to find 17 messages about overdue maintenance tasks and a supervisor asking where he had been for the past day. He got back to work fixing a faulty air recycler, grateful to be dealing with simple problems that had simple solutions. He never knew that the Unified Council had begun long-term observation protocols for humanity. Not as potential enemies, not as potential allies, but as something they had not seen in 10,000 years, that a species that could not stop trying to fix things. The Combat Systems database updated humanity's status from unknown to recognized. The pattern had been confirmed after all these millennia. Somewhere in the arena's deepest archives, an ancient file activated. It contained a single message from the precursor race, left behind before they vanished. If you find another species with our pattern, treat them kindly. They will restructure your civilizations whether you want them to or not. But they will do it because they genuinely believe broken things should be fixed. That is not malice. That is just how they are built.